Hello again, everybody. Welcome to Matt and Cheryl's Gen Excellent Playlist. I'm Matt.
I'm Sheryl.
We've just opened the door to 1982, and we're going to add a couple songs to our playlist today from that year. Boy, it's been a minute. Busy summer. And we got a new kitty. She may make an appearance here while I'm doing this. That's been very fun. Maybe you should tell the folks the name of the cat that you had when we were working at Silver Platters together. Meow. Who named that? we had a cat named Itty Bitty. And I thought that was the
kitty?
Itty Bitty Little Kitty was the full name. Mm-hmm. It's just Itty. Mm-hmm. Itty. And I thought that was the dumbest name for a pet ever until I met your cat.
Meow Purr was already named by the time it moved in with me, so I had nothing to do with that.
Yeah, Itty just showed up on our doorstep one day in my hometown. Just showed up and said, okay, I'm living here now.
That's pretty much how Mike's family got all of their pets. Yeah. They had some kind of beacon at their house or something.
Yeah.
Homeless pets come here.
We already had a cat that was a stray that we found under a tractor next to the dairy bar when we were out getting food.
Boy, that sounds so small town, doesn't it? I'm expecting John Cougar to come in at any moment and start singing about this.
I am so glad. I mean, we did not rehearse that. I'm glad you mentioned John Cougar because this year in particular, I was excited about. Now, John Cougar is one of those artists that the fandom in me has been steadily growing over the years, much like Bruce Springsteen. And those two get lumped together a lot, and I think fairly so. I know John Cougar in particular is a bristly sort of person. He's a feisty guy. Part of the reason I'm intrigued and like him, I've mentioned before, I'm a big Bill Maher fan, and I watch his show Real Time religiously and his podcast Club Random. And I think my favorite Club Random to this point, and it's been going a couple of years now, he posts a new one weekly. I think my favorite one to this point was the John Mellencamp one. He had Mellencamp on, I think, for more than 2 hours.
Wow.
Because he was just that fascinating. And Maher usually he usually ends his podcast saying, well, I got to get back to my real job now. Time for you to leave, But he couldn't end it with Mellencamp. He just kept going and going and going. And, I find the guy very fascinating. But American Fool, this was his breakthrough year in 1982, the American Fool album. It's really good. It's really good.
That's one I have not listened to yet, and I didn't have it back in the day, so I've really never listened to that album.
I'm probably going to end up picking a Mellencamp song for the playlist. I'm kind of torn between the two big hit singles. Now, there were 3 singles on that album, and they front-loaded them all at the beginning. So the album starts with Hurt So Good, then Jack and Diane, and that would be the
iconic.
That's the iconic song. It's the logical choice. That's the one that's transcended generations. Young people now could still sing along to that.
Yeah.
Although I'm going back to Hurt So Good. That's just practically perfect song. And I didn't like it at the time. When it was out, I didn't care for it.
I never disliked any of his songs. I always was just kind of neutral. I could take him or leave him. But I do like Jack and Diane. What's the third single?
The third single is you would put me on the spot right now.
I don't remember. I can look it up. What's it?
It's really good too.
I forget what songs are on
Hand to Hold
albums.
On to Hold On To.
Yeah.
That's a really good song.
I mean, they are, but they're kind of boring. I think
no.
Too is a little bit boring. And Jack and Diane is more interesting. That's why that's the one that comes to mind for me. But that is an album I want to listen to.
Arrangement-wise, Jack and Diane certainly the most interesting of the 3 songs.
It's got the cool drum part, Kenny Aronoff on drums. It bothers me though and we've run into this a few times too, like with the Police, when they put all the hits, the first 2, and in fact, one of the songs we're going to talk about today, on the Asia album, they do the same thing. Like they've got the singles, the first 2 songs, and I don't like that. I like to have something to look forward to a little bit. Like I feel like they blow their wad at the beginning, and then it's like, okay, well.
That's a fair argument, I think, but there are definitely at least 2 other really good songs after the 3 singles on American Feel.
I don't know. I'll have to go listen to it. Like I said, I haven't listened to the whole album.
You're throwing back to the Police Ghost in the Machine album with the 3 singles up front.
Yeah.
You're still torn on that album. It seems like you're a little...
Well, honestly, what made me like the album more was when I listened to the different sequencing. And
Yeah.
they changed it so they didn't have those 3 songs right at the beginning, and it just opened it up for me, and I was like, "Oh, okay. This makes way more sense." And now I actually do like it because the songs that I felt that were kind of boring, they were all lumped together and didn't have anything breaking them up that was something interesting or something I knew. It just really changed the whole dynamic for me with the different sequencing, which is why I feel like I do have a problem with front loading an album like that with the singles.
So American Fool's the breakthrough for John Cougar, and he's an older guy. I mean, he's been around a while at this point. He's put out a few albums. Nothing Matters What If It Did was the preceding one, and I've got that too. And I listened to it when we were on that year, and there's, it's intriguing, but it took him a long time to kind of find his voice and his way. And I think part of that was he was kind of getting manipulated by record company people. He signed up with David Bowie's management team. He was on RCA Records, Bowie's label, Main Man Management. I think John finally realized, hey, I'm going to do it my way or the highway. And that's kind of been his thing ever since. And he's got this reputation of being very prickly. But if you look at his band, I mean, they stuck together for a while. And here's another good example of an artist, he's promoted as just him. But a lot of his success is due to the great band he had around him. It stayed together for a long time.
Yeah.
You mentioned Kenny Aronoff on the drums. We got Larry Crane and Mike Wanchik on the guitars. Excellent band. Really good band.
It's kind of like Billy Joel and his band, where these are more guys that really were a band.
Yeah. Elton John, another good example.
Elton John, they weren't billed as a band, they were billed under a solo artist name. And it was during the most popular part of his career for John Cougar, that this band was together. And they really are a band. Or even like Hall & Oates, how you said like they're a band.
Yep,
these
another
guys,
good example.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think a lot of times it's too bad because the band members don't get the credit. Yeah, he had a great band behind him. I Need a Lover was a hit for him off of his second album. That was the first song that made any impact. But the albums themselves, his first 2 albums get like terrible reviews and they just don't go anywhere. I think he's really searching for a style. Like you said, he's being kind of manipulated into trying to make a style that really wasn't him. But then he's got 3 albums. American Fool, Aha, and Scarecrow are huge albums for him.
Yeah, I've liked the singles all along. And I think I'm like you. You thought he was all right. And, the first time I ever heard John Cougar, and I'm going to keep calling him John Cougar because that's what he was then. He was John Cougar. He wasn't John Cougar Mellencamp yet. He wasn't John Mellencamp. He was John. When he broke out, he was John Cougar. Before that, I think he was Johnny Cougar too. When he first recorded, wasn't it
his
Johnny?
First album, he's Johnny Cougar. Right. Then he's John Cougar for the next 3 albums. Then he's John Cougar Mellencamp for several albums. And then he finally drops the Cougar like in the late 80s.
It's funny too. You hear that name now and you're like, how corny is that? Johnny Cougar? Really? But I remember, as a kid, when Hurt So Good hit the radio, it didn't register as being unusual. It's like, oh, this guy's John Cougar.
Yeah.
But now it's like, Jesus, imagine being him too. And he's he's a feisty guy, and he was a boxer in his younger days too. And it's like, if anybody's like poking fun and calling him Johnny Cougar now, I mean, them's fighting words.
He's a pretty small guy too. Like
Yes, so he's got that syndrome going for him.
He's got that thing where he's like got to prove himself, and
But he's fascinating, and one thing I didn't know about him, he's got this reputation, well deserved, of being Mr. Midwest blue collar, singing songs about the working man and the poor folks. He's from a very privileged background, actually.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Even though he grew up in small town Indiana, he was from a very wealthy background, which I found very surprising, because one of the things you always heard about John Cougar, he never left his hometown. I mean, he's basically stayed rooted where he's from, in a small town in Indiana.
Which is where I think the parallels to like Bruce Springsteen would come into play there too.
Yeah. But anyway, more talk about John Cougar Mellencamp certainly to come. I mean, his best work is in the future. You mentioned the 2 albums, Aha and Scarecrow. Great songs. Mm-hmm. The singles off of those in the mid-decades. But going back and listening to American Fool for the first time, and for the first time giving it serious listen, headphone listening, first time ever, Hurt So Good is a great song. I mean, it's beautifully constructed, very well sung, well written. It's a tight composition. The guitars sound wonderful. One of the things I love about John Cougar is he doesn't fall prey to the 80s production. And
no.
I think a lot of the song a lot of the songs we're going to end up picking probably avoided the pitfalls of the 1980s production styles, which ruined a lot of music. His songs, they have bite. It's a live band playing in a room. They don't sound processed and digital, although you mentioned the drums, and this I hadn't noticed before. That drum break on Jack and Diane, that's like right out of In the Air Tonight.
The sound, but also just the do 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 do.
Yes.
Totally. Yep.
That's like a nod to Phil Collins. That never really dawned on me, even though I've heard that song a million times.
Aside from that drum break, I think you're right. His albums don't place themselves in the 80s. They seem timeless.
They've aged well.
Yes.
They don't sound like, these time capsules like a lot of the music of the 1980s. So now you mentioned one of the bands we're going to talk about here, Asia, puts out their debut album in 1982. And I think this album came out at the right time because now 82, we're starting to really get into the 80s stereotypical sounds, but they still have that warm analog synth sound, which I think makes this album still sound pretty good. And it sounds really good. It does. Their first, I hadn't listened to this album in forever. It was the first cassette tape I ever bought. First album I ever bought on cassette tape.
And how many songs did you have to fast forward through?
None. I wore
okay,
this
is a really good cassette thing to buy on cassette then.
Yeah,
so you don't have to fast forward.
I wore this thing out. So I didn't have the first gen Walkman that came out when we were in junior high. I had the second gen, which was the mini one, which was an incredible bit of technology at the time because it looked cool. It was shiny and gray metal one with like red graphic on it. And what was amazing about this Walkman is when you weren't using it, you could carry it around in the case where you carried your cassette tapes. It fit in the slots. Along with
it was the exact same
Yes.
size?
Oh, so that was a pretty hip piece of equipment to own back in the day. And this was the first album I ever had on cassette. So I had my little mixtapes that I was recording stuff off the radio.
Yeah.
And off records that my dad brought home from the radio station. But this was the first album I ever owned on cassette. And like I said, I wore it out and I didn't skip songs. I liked the album start to finish. I liked it all. But listening to it just now for the first time in 30, 40 years, not 40 years, but maybe close to.
Boy, you're aging us, aren't you?
Oh yeah. Well, I never owned this record on CD. I still have that cassette somewhere. I don't know where all my old cassettes are buried at this point, but I haven't listened to it in a million years. And so I pulled it up and I started listening. It's like, God, it still sounds really good. You got Heat of the Moment, which is the song we're putting on the playlist today, the lead single, which came out in, I guess, early spring of 1982. The album came out in March in the U.S. It actually came out in the U.S. before the U.K., which will tell you a little something about the nature of this record. This was This is kind of a record. This is a big record company project for Geffen Records, which was a pretty new label at the time. This is the first band they signed. Geffen's big debut was John Lennon's Double Fantasy, John Lennon and Yoko Ono's Double Fantasy. That was their big statement as a label, is getting John Lennon out of retirement and putting out this new album. Donna Summer was an early signing as well. But Asia was the first band they signed. And they, the record company was very involved in the genesis of this band. And this was an idea that germinated years before Geffen was even a label. One of the big honchos at Geffen was at Atlantic Records at the time. And he approached John Wetton, who's the lead singer and bassist and primary songwriter, who at the time was playing with Roxy Music. He was kind of between bands. And you look at John Wetton's history, and Sheryl, you're going to carry a lot of weight on this too as the prog expert here. John Wetton played for just about every prog band in the 70s at one point. He broke in with Family in the early 70s. He was on 2 records with Family, which is a band not too many people are aware of because they didn't have any hits in the United States. I mean, they would have been played on like underground FM radio in the late 60s, early 70s, and they never had anything approaching a hit single or hit album here. They were more well-known in the UK. Interesting band. I'm just starting to kind of get into their stuff.
Yeah, I haven't listened to them much.
But then, he was in King Crimson, kind of the second iteration of King Crimson after that.
During their glory years, really. I mean, aside from the first album, which is the
Well,
one that's
yeah,
the
the first
most.
album is the one people cite. Yeah.
Yes, but then there's that middle period where he joined in 1972,
I think
and
the Islands album was his first record with King Crimson, and then
no, actually, he was Lark's Tongue in Aspic, Starless, and Bible Black and Red.
okay,
So
so I guess he
three
joined
iconic
right after
albums
Islands.
for
Yeah,
King Crimson. Yeah,
so he
and
wasn't on the recording of Islands.
no, Boz Burrell was the singer. There was kind of they had a few other singers in between after Greg Lake, who was the singer on the first album, who then went on to form Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And John Wetton's voice is actually very similar to Greg Lake's.
It is, yeah.
And so when Robert Fripp brought John Wetton in, because they'd known each other for a long time, he was doing that because he knew that they were very similar. So he was the lead singer and bass player for King Crimson for those 3 albums.
And Lark's Tongue is probably, when people list their favorite King Crimson albums or the most popular King Crimson albums, it's probably number 2 behind the first record.
Yeah, I would say definitely for this incarnation before the 80s King Crimson came around. I would say Lark's Tongue. But I think Red is also really popular too. After the first album, until they broke up in 1974, these 3 albums would be the ones that most people would know.
So he's in that iteration of King Crimson, forms a relationship with Bill Bruford, who was the drummer in the group at that time. Wetton had actually known Robert Fripp from a young age. They're both from Bournemouth in England. Wetton wasn't born there, but lived there as a child and got to know Fripp, I think, before they were teenagers. But Fripp breaks up this band. And then he's kind of a free agent for a while, helps out with, he's in Roxy Music. I don't think he's on is he on any recordings of Roxy Music?
He's on the live album.
Okay, yeah, he's the touring
Viva,
band.
yeah.
But wasn't with them long enough to record. He was on 2 Uriah Heep albums.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't he have a dalliance with Wishbone Ash too?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. If you are a 70s fan and a prog freak, I'm sure you're aware of Pete Frame's Rock Family Trees. He's one of those perfect guys for the family
He's
tree.
Branching out all over the place.
So many of these
tree.
branches.
He also formed UK with Bill Bruford, Alan Holdsworth, and Eddie Jobson from Roxy Music. And their first album is really, really cool. It's, a classic prog album.
Yeah, it's very King Crimson-like.
Yeah, it is. And then they had a second album with Bill Bruford left the band, and Alan Holdsworth did too, and Terry Bozzio from Frank Zappa's band, and who would later be Missing Persons with his wife Dale Bozzio. He joined. So their second album, he's the drummer on that album.
And then particularly that second album, so the keyboardist on both albums is Eddie Jobson, who was a teenager on that first record, very young. And then I see some live clips on YouTube of the second iteration of the group with Terry Bozzio and no guitarist. So Eddie Jobson is the feature. I mean, he's the guy playing all the solos and stuff because there's no guitars. You're not playing bass solos. And it's wild. I mean, he's got this huge bank of synths, and then he plays
He plays violin,
that
too.
plexiglass violin. He's giving these incredible sound. I watched a clip from, I guess it was maybe his Old Green Whistle Test, and he's getting these wild sounds out of the violin. He's kind of picking it before he's playing and using these effects. Crazy talented musician.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're very, very prog, UK.
Yes.
But it's while Wetton is playing with Roxy that this guy, John Kalodner, approaches him. And he's a record label guy at Atlantic. He's saying, dude, what are you doing here? I mean, you need to be doing your own thing. I mean, he's got this great voice.
He does have one of the best voices, definitely in prog, for sure.
Yeah, very pleasing voice. It's warm. It's in a lower register. He can get a little sandpaper grit in there when he's got that little bit of soul to it too. Really wonderful singer. And when you get right down to it, I think that is what puts Asia over the top. Now, it's a super group with all these big time prog musicians. I would have known nothing about the backgrounds of any of these guys.
Yeah.
When I got this tape, at 13 years old or however old I was when I got it, I wouldn't have known anything about it. I just knew hearing the songs on the radio and liking them a lot. But, Wetton's been in all these bands. You got Steve Howe, who's one of the most virtuosic, talented guitarists in rock history. I think it goes without saying.
Guitars for yes.
You got Carl Palmer, the drummer from ELP, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And then Jeff Downs, who was in the latter period, yes, briefly, with Trevor Horn on the Drama album, which Sheryl and I both love. And then
Mm-hmm.
the Buggles, of course, was those two guys. Their
Mm-hmm.
project after Yes briefly disbanded. So that's the core of Asia, although apparently they auditioned a lot of different people for this group before they settled on these four. Incredible, some of the names. Roy Wood was considered.
Okay.
I mean, which would have been weird. Roy Wood from The Move and the early ELO and Wizard.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of American music fans will know that name, but he's very well known in England. Very well known. I mean, had huge hits with all three of those groups. Apparently, Robert Fleischman, who was Journey's vocalist for a brief time before Steve Perry took over, was under consideration as the lead vocalist. And Fleischman had the good sense and the good grace to say, dude, these songs sound much better. You're a great singer. You should be singing these songs, not
Why
me.
would John Wetton be in a band and not be a singer? Actually, he was in Family, and he wasn't a singer in Family.
Right.
Rick Gretsch was the singer. It's like, how could you be in a band and not be the lead singer? Because he just has such a great vocal talent.
But you have all of this incredible instrumental talent in this supergroup, Asia. But really, what puts this album over the top and I think makes it a huge sell, and it was the biggest selling album of 1982.
Yeah.
Asia's debut album. What puts is his voice. That's what really sells this record. He's a great singer. And of course, the production value on this record, which is outstanding. Mike Stone, who's a really hot name right now being 1982. He's just coming off working on Journey's Escape, which of course was a huge 1981 record. And all these guys wanted him because they loved the sound of the record. And this record does sound great. And he gets great vocals from John Wetton, great vocal takes, great performances, and great sounding vocal recordings. It's a wonderful sounding record. You got all this talent, and they rein in those prog tendencies. There are some prog moments on this record for sure, but this is a mainstream rock and roll album.
Yeah.
It is machine tooled for radio, and it popped because Heat of the Moment sounded great coming out of the radio in 1982. And it's mainly because of John Wetton's vocal performance, but its calling card was those opening guitar chords from Steve Howe, which are
I love the way this
massive guitar chords. Yeah. What a fanfare to announce this big new band on Geffen Records. Bah, 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 bah. And I love the story behind this. They recorded, I think he used 7 different guitars and 7 different amplifiers, and they overdubbed it all together to create this massive sounding opening few bars on this record. And boy, does it sell it.
It's perfect. It's perfect for the radio. I mean, this is one of those songs that just jumps out on the radio. That opening moment, it just sucks you right in instantly. And I also, at the time, had no idea who Steve Howe was. I knew, honestly, this song more from MTV than the radio. And I just thought, oh, these guys are old. They were old, but I didn't know who they were, what they were from. I wasn't a Yes fan at this time, so I didn't know Steve Howe. You know, I maybe knew a little bit of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, but I would never have made the connection that was Carl Palmer. Just, I didn't know who they were, but I did love this song. And I think that it's also an album I never owned at the time, never listened to the whole album, just knew the singles, but loved all of them.
I didn't know anything about the back. I don't think I even was aware of Yes at all when I was getting into this Asia album. That came later. Not
and
much
this is
later.
Also before 90125, which came out in 83. So really, Yes, at this point was not in the, the mainstream current day. They were a has-been band by this time, really.
I'm glad you said that, because what makes this album pretty interesting is, I mean, prog rock is dead as disco at this point. I mean, at least that's the perception.
Yes.
So you're coming out of the punk rock explosion in England, new wave, and prog rock is just yesterday's news. Nobody wants to have anything to do with it.
I mean, even King Crimson and Genesis, 2 of the pillars of prog rock, are turning pop. They're turning more pop at this time. Pop rock mainstream, especially Genesis.
Which makes it very interesting that they used Yes's illustrator, Roger Dean, the famous Roger Dean, who created all those magical, mystical,
wizardly.
the Yes album covers throughout the 70s. And not all the band members were on board with this because, first of all, if you're Carl Palmer and you're an ELP and you don't want to be compared to Yes, I mean, they were your competitors. But I find this cover interesting because, yes, it is harkening back to the prog era, but it's also very 80s looking in its design because I'm going to preface this by I'm talking way out of school here. I know nothing about art. I have no art background. I've never took an art class. I have zero artistic ability, none. I really know very little about art. But what I do know is that Asian art influenced a lot of 80s design.
Yeah.
The Duran Duran record covers were very influential. It's very Asian influenced.
Yeah.
So there is definitely that feel on this cover, which is contemporary. It's modern, but it's harkening back with the dragon. It's kind of straddling the modern, shiny 80s with the more proggy 70s. And it's funny because there's a lyric, and I never picked up on this until researching the episode. There's a lyric in the song, which I'd misheard. You catch the pearl and ride the dragon's wings. That's a reference to the album cover. And apparently,
that's what's happening.
Apparently he wrote that line on the day that Roger Dean delivered the album art to the band.
Okay.
I guess I'd heard it as you catch and pull and ride the dragon's wings. And I never kind of tied it in with the dragon on the cover. I thought maybe that's like a heroin reference or something. I don't know what. I don't think chasing the dragon.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's that. I mean, these are all prog heavyweights, which should be has-beens, but they're going for Journey Styx audience here.
Yeah.
You know, Boston, they're right in that AOR wheelhouse, getting Mike Stone, who produced the massive Journey album. Mike Stone, who was kind of a protege of Roy Thomas Baker, the Queen producer. He was known for getting great vocal recordings and the harmonies, which made Queen very, very popular in the 1970s. And the harmonies are wonderful on this record. Another interesting thing, you know, Steve Howe was a big part of Yes too, was the 3-part harmonies. Steve Howe and Chris Squire were the other two vocalists with John Anderson. Good, good on those harmonies. So you got Steve Howe delivering.
Steve Howe is great on the harmonies, but God, I really wish that someone would tell him to never sing lead. Why does this continue to happen? There's several Yes albums too, especially later in their career, even like the most recent ones, where he'll sing a lead on a song. It's like somebody has to just tell him to stop doing that. And the fourth song on this album, it starts out and you're like, okay, this is a pretty cool song. Because this is also one of those albums where the first 3 songs are the singles.
Yep.
And then the fourth song, you're like, okay, this is pretty cool. And then Steve Howe's voice comes in. And I'm like, oh, no. Now, if I was listening to this on cassette, I'd be fast forwarding for like, several minutes waiting for it because it's terrible. But he is a good backup singer and he does add a lot in the backup vocals. But please, stop singing lead.
And it is, it's multiple band members on the harmonies for the most part on this record. But on Heat of the Moment, it's all John Wetton. He's overdubbing himself on these harmonies, which I didn't know either. But yeah, it's a great sounding record. It is top tier AOR. Again, not for music critics. They hated this band. They still do. And a lot of prog fans are very sniffy about the Asia albums too. It's not prog. No, it just sounds good. They're just good songs. They're well played. They're well recorded.
I think it's very cool that they can straddle both worlds. I love the fact that they had hit songs on this album. And they still do keep to their prog roots in a lot of it too. I had never owned this album at the time. I just listened to it for the first time, really? In the last week.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
And it's weird. I don't know why I have never really gravitated to this album. It's always kind of just been like, I know the singles, of course, and I love the singles, but I've thought of them as more of like an AOR band, not prog band. So I just had never bothered really listening to it. But it's a really good album, actually. And I do think that it
still holds up.
It still holds up. Definitely the musicianship, of course, is top notch, which it should be with these guys.
But they've reined it in and they've compacted these songs. There's no wild flights of fancy. Although, Steve Howe definitely has his moments. There's a really great guitar solo on side. I can't remember which song it is exactly. But, Steve Howe in particular has these really tight, compact guitar solos that really work within the song structure.
Well, even the guitar solo on Heat of the Moment, I think, is really cool.
Yes.
And it doesn't sound proggy at all, but it's just a really cool solo. And so, yeah, that's why I think this is neat, is that they did rein it in enough. They still kind of spread their wings and do some really cool stuff on some of the album tracks that are a little bit longer, but there's no song on this album that is longer than 5.5 minutes, which is like unheard of on a prog album, you know, so
Right.
it's certainly not a prog album. But on those a little bit longer songs and those album tracks, you know, they do really showcase their musicianship in a way that does not feel pretentious. They're just doing like a rock version
Yeah.
of kind of what they were doing in their prog lives.
Now, listening to this album just a little while ago for the first time in forever, when I had it at the time, I would listen to it start to finish. I liked it all. I know I like the singles the best, but it does lose momentum toward the end of side one, and then side two is not nearly as interesting as side one.
Which is why if they would have stuck one of those singles on side two, like even
Yeah.
Soul Survivor, if they would have started
Yeah.
side two with Soul Survivor, that would have made more
Yeah.
sense to me. Although Here Comes the Feeling, the last song, that song sounds familiar to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was ever played on the radio, but it sounds familiar and it sounds like a song that could have been like a radio song.
Another thing that strikes me, and I seem to remember noting this at the time too, one of the lyrics in the song, it's the second verse, and now you find yourself in 82. That's really cool to me. And I started thinking about this. How many contemporary songs, singles, hit singles, reference the current year in which the song was released?
I know.
That's got to be one of the very few, I think.
I love that. That's
I
one of
do
my
too.
favorite parts of this song.
I find that really cool. I
Me
find that really
too.
cool. And for some reason, I think it just kind of helps them be contemporary because, I mean, they were all taken aback by the success of this record. I don't think they had any idea going in. This was a big thing for Geffen. They put a lot of muscle behind this. And obviously, the germination of this record was years before with John Kolodner seeing the potential with John Wetton as a frontman. And you mentioned they're old. Yeah. But he's an attractive man. He's easy on the eyes. He's kind of like a less boyish Paul McCartney kind of looking.
A little bit, yeah.
So he's puts an attractive face up front. Steve Howe, less said the better about his looks, but the other guys in the band, they're pretty attractive looking people. And they've got their modern 80s rock haircut. They're all decked out. They're more mature men. They're not young whippersnappers coming out with a debut album, certainly. But, when you saw them on MTV, you didn't recoil in horror. And we're not yet to the point where MTV has become so pervasive as to wipe out all of these older, more portly, bearded, not so attractive men from the landscape completely, that guys like this could still have some success. And the video was cool. Godley and Cream. They got Godley and Cream to do the videos, and these guys were the absolute cutting edge of music videos at this time. And it's a cool video.
Mm-hmm. It is, yeah. And I think that was smart too, that they did work the video angle in a way they're in the video, but they're not really super showcased. There's other stuff going on. Yeah. I mean, I think they were just really smart about it. And I love that they reference 82. I think maybe they did that because they wanted to be like, okay, now here we are in 1982 and we're still around and we're doing something current. And I like that. It sounds like
Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow?
Yeah, it's a Phil Spector sounding drum pattern. I also love the little twinkly keyboards and then the on the bass.
Well, the warm synth sound I'm talking about, the next single, which is almost as good, I think only time will tell.
Yeah.
I would have been torn to tell you which was my favorite back in the first three songs were the singles you mentioned. Soul Survivor, not as big a hit as the other two, but another really good song. But that opening synth fanfare, that's that warm analog synth sound that I love from the late 70s, early 80s that would soon go away when the digital synths and the FM synths came in, which had that horribly dated, tinny sound.
Yeah, which is interesting because these older guys are coming through with the synth sound that actually holds up way better than the cutting edge stuff that was happening at that time. That really
Donald
is
Fagen,
so
Steve Winwood. Yeah, all these older veteran musicians had that great synth sound at this time.
And they're having hits at this time still.
So this would have been my big record for 82, obviously. It's not going to be my favorite record of 1982 now, although I'd say it holds up pretty well over the years. I still like it. I don't love side two, but Bang, 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 side, and One Step Closer I like a lot too. one of the things that I note about One Step Closer, and that's the first song that Steve Howe was a co-writer on, he's got a really strong country influence in his playing. I don't think people talk about a lot. I mean, he's a master of many guitar styles. He's an excellent country picker. If you ever heard, I mean, obviously the acoustic showcases he had on those early Yes albums are just breathtaking.
Mm-hmm.
But he's very influenced by Chet Atkins. That was one of his big guitar
Mm-hmm.
influences, and you can hear that country feel a little bit. It's hard to imagine a country influence on this very '80s rock record, but it's there if you listen on One Step Closer. But yeah, so the heat of the moment, and then of course, what an '80s chorus! The heat of the moment. I mean, it's just made to be played in like stadiums and stuff, or just. That's a very '80s feel to that line, you know?
Yeah. This song does kind of perfectly encapsulate that AOR '80s feeling. I don't even think we talked about this album on the AOR show, but it really does, as much as Journey to me and as much as those bands. And really, these guys all had so much experience playing in stadiums. They were in bands that were big enough to fill a stadium, or arenas at least.
Three of them, yes. Carl Palmer, obviously, with
Yeah.
Emerson, Lake and Palmer, they were massive. Yes was massive. You know, Jeff Downes. The drama album wasn't the big seller that earlier albums were, but Yes was still a huge concert attraction when he and
Yeah.
Trevor Horn joined. So they were still playing big arenas. It was a new thing for John Wetton. Yeah, he hadn't experienced that level yet.
Yeah, that's true, because he was more in he was more underground. Like the bands that he was in were popular for that genre, but they were definitely more underground. Yeah.
I think UK opened big stadium shows, but they weren't a big stadium attraction themselves. I think they opened on a Jethro Tull tour, and Tull was a massive stadium, big attraction, great live band back then. But I think Wetton kind of struggled once this album really started to hit, and when they toured it, they had originally scheduled theater shows, and they quickly had to change approach because the ticket demand was far more than they were expecting. They moved on to arenas, and then Wetton had an alcohol problem, and he was having some issues, and unfortunately the band's momentum would peter out the following year. They were rushed back into the studio to record their second album, which wasn't nearly as good. The two singles were still quality. Don't Cry and The Smiles Left Your Eyes, two good singles. But their second album was less of the prog influence, more pop direction, didn't sound nearly as good. Mike Stone wasn't as hands-on with the production as he was on the first album. He had his own alcohol problems too, and he died young because of it. And then by the end of the year, this is when I'm really getting into Asia's, probably in '83 more than '82. I didn't get it right away. So I remember being stoked because there was this big concert they were going to put on in Japan, and it was going to be via satellite, broadcast live worldwide and live on MTV. Didn't have MTV, but I remember being very stoked about this and, glued to my radio to hear Asia live. And what a cool idea, to Asia in Asia.
Yeah.
And it sucked. It was terrible. It absolutely blew chunks. And I didn't realize this at the time, but they booted John Wetton out of the band. They brought Greg Lake in on short notice.
Yes.
And, Lake's a good singer too. And like you mentioned, similar voice, but he was under-rehearsed. He didn't sound good. The band didn't sound good. And I remember listening and thinking, oh, this is bad. I don't like this at all. But I still got their third record on vinyl, Astra, which... not so hot. Wetton brokered a deal to return to the band, but he said, I'm only coming back if Steve Howe is out, because I think Howe was one of the guys who pushed to have him removed. Wetton's in all these bands and have all this constant lineup turnover, bickering and egos, and it's just the typical story. Astra is not that good album. There's not a good single to sell it. And by this point,
I don't know any songs from that album.
I had it on vinyl. I remember I taped it. I remember listening to it in my Walkman and trying to like it, but really, no, it was over, and nobody wanted anything to do with them. They didn't even tour after that album. Nobody wanted them anymore.
The guitars they brought in was the guitars from Crocus.
Right, Mandy Meyer.
Which is a much different, I mean, we're talking like a metal band, like that's a much different sound than what you would get with Steve Howe. And that's one of the things that's so cool, I think, about the first Asia album, is that like you said, the style, like even bringing country in, like Steve Howe, he's such a well-rounded and has so much talent and can do so much that
Incredible technical ability. Yeah.
and technical ability that he doesn't really have to rely on 100%. It's not showy, like he's still just playing this kind of more straightforward stuff. You can hear that technical ability in him and take that out of the mix. I'm actually even surprised that they even made it to a second album, honestly. This is a super group.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about a super group, you're also talking about super egos.
Yep.
So it's pretty shocking they even made it to 2 albums.
And we haven't talked about the drumming. We've talked about the Townhouse, and we're going to move on to XTC next. But that great drum room with all the rocks on the walls and the massive drum sounds influenced by Lily White, Hugh Padgham, the sounds they got at the Townhouse with Phil Collins and with the XTC Drums and Wires and Black Sea albums. So this album was partly recorded there as well. Carl Palmer is obviously a very talented drummer, and the drums.
I love the drums on this album.
Everything on this album just sounds massive.
Mm-hmm. It was a perfect moment in time. Just this one album.
Yeah.
Then it should have just ended.
Yeah. Although again, I had the next album on tape, and I didn't listen to it nearly as much as the first one. And really, it was more about the 2 singles there. I couldn't hum a bar of any other song.
I only know Don't Cry. And that video cracks me up because Steve Howe, it's sort of like Indiana Jones. And there's one scene where he's like kissing the beautiful woman. And I'm just like, that just seems so wrong because Steve Howe is not the leading man by any means.
Oh, Steve, we love you.
Yeah, we do.
All right. Well, I've referenced XTC, and I have to say, I'm disappointed that all of you listening today cannot see my partner and friend here, who has her own homemade. Oh, I don't want to get you in trouble with. But
I'm not selling them.
No, she's wearing this beautiful XTC T-shirt that's patterned after the design on the English Settlement album, which we're going to talk about next, and in particular, the brilliant single that they released from that album. I'm kind of torn on Census Working Overtime because in one respect, it's one of the great singles anybody has ever put out. And I think we both agree on that. It's just,
yes.
it is one of the all-time great pop singles, yet it is still a very complicated work and a challenging work, particularly at the beginning of the song. Mm-hmm. So on one side of me goes, God, how did America miss out on this? And this wasn't a hit here. It wasn't a number 1, but it was a big hit single for them in England. It was a top 10 hit there. But it's typical XTC, where you have the dissonant, challenging verse followed by the incredibly catchy, hooky, melodic chorus. And this is kind of the apex for them.
Oh, yeah. I agree. I actually compare this song to being on par with Good Vibrations.
Yeah. I wouldn't balk at that.
In that same vein, it has different parts. It has the soaring chorus, but it is deceptively complicated. And sort of the flip side of Asia, like I can see why Asia was popular in America and not in the UK, because it was just rock, it's arena rock made for
American rock radio.
Yeah. And I can also see why this is popular in the UK and not in America, because, we're getting into more complicated song structures. This comes from my favorite XTC album, which is English Settlement. And around this time, you've already talked a lot about XTC and Andy Partridge and sort of how he went through this whole, not being able to tour anymore and a lot of anxiety based on issues he was having with Valium addiction and going off of that. And this is like right at the apex of when that was happening. They were writing songs that were more complicated. And I think with the intention for Andy Partridge, writing songs that were more complicated, that were a little bit harder to play live. They definitely would go into that after this album because they wouldn't really stop touring and just be a studio band. They actually had recorded this album and it didn't have a single. So the record label was like, we need a single. And so he wrote this song to be the single. And there's a really great documentary on Showtime called This Is Pop about XTC.
If you're a fan of the band, essential. Yeah.
Yes.
It's really well done.
He talks about the process of how he's coming up with this. And there's a song by Manfred Mann called 54321 that was the theme song to a very popular music show in the UK in the 60s called Ready, Steady, Go. And the song was a hit for them too. And so that was the song he had in mind initially, because he kind of had that number, the counting down, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but he switched it to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then he talks about kind of going through and sort of thinking of it like a nursery rhyme structure to it. The verses do have like a nursery rhyme feeling to them. And so as he was going through this like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, he's like, well, what do we have 5 of? Senses. We have 5 senses. And then he comes up with this really interesting chord structure that is so unusual, and there is a dissonance about it, you know, that just feels a little bit off. You can kind of picture yourself being in this strange dream state. It's very dreamy and just odd, but it's still catchy. And like you were saying too about their songs, you get into this kind of pre-chorus, which is actually my favorite part of the song. And all the world is football shaped.
Part of the reason I think it didn't work on American radio, because the world is football shaped. What?
Yeah.
It's not football shaped.
Right.
Well, a football in England is a sphere.
It's football shaped in England.
Yeah,
yes.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. That's when the band starts to come in, because initially you just have the acoustic guitar and Andy's voice. And then you get the drum pattern. And I love the drums on this song. It has a really also kind of dissonant feeling drum pattern, because he's hitting the snare like on the 3 instead of the 2 or the 4.
You want to talk about deceptively complicated. Terry Chambers drumming. I mean, you just feel like he's kind of a straight 4/4 pounder, but his drum tracks, there's more going on there than meets the ear. If you got to pay close attention.
Yeah, and actually this song is one of those songs that in order to play it, you have to really know the song. It has different parts to it, and each part is very integral to the song, and it has to be played exactly like that, or else, you know, there's nothing straightforward about this song, really. When the drums come in, once again, it just feels a little off kilter. And then you go into the chorus, which is so melodic. So many of XTC songs are like this, where they rise and rise and rise up.
But as the rhythm master here, you got to mention the transition from the pre-chorus to the chorus, and this is the clever conceit here with the counting. You get a 5-beat bar to set up the chorus. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then into a straight 4/4 chorus.
Yes. And that also adds to that buildup where, you know, you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're into the chorus.
Yeah.
When I was listening to this song recently, this is where I started kind of making that connection with Good Vibrations, which also feels like it's very sectioned off into parts and kind of builds into this beautiful chorus. And really, I mean, I think Andy Partridge is at the same level as Brian Wilson and Paul McCartney.
Oh, no doubt. If we accomplish nothing else from our exercise doing this podcast, Sheryl, going through these years, because the song selections that we've made so far have been very mainstream for the most part, with a couple of exceptions. But we're going to make sure that people realize where this band and these guys fit in the pantheon, because they are right up there with the all-time greats. I mean, like I said, they're as close as we've gotten to the Beatles since the Beatles.
Yeah, I think so too. I think XTC and Robin Hitchcock, those are the two people that we're going to, you know, shed light on, so that hopefully some people will go and check out their catalog.
Yeah, our pet faves, but certainly we're not alone there, but not popular mainstream. But there will be many more XTC songs to come, and certainly a few Robin songs. Yeah.
Going back to this song, by the time you get to that middle 8, that break in the middle, it's already one of the coolest songs you've ever heard. And then you get to that part where the acoustic guitar mirrors the do 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 do, which I love. It's so cool.
Yes.
And you know, you get the driving drums, and it elevates it up to a whole higher level. And it already was so amazing.
You got key modulations. There's a lot of complexity to this song, but just a perfect sing-along chorus.
Yeah, the chorus is the hook that keeps you there and makes you wanting more.
Some of the greatest music, in my opinion, is not immediate. You need to listen to it a few times before you get it. And XTC is a perfect example of that, especially Andy Partridge's songs. Now, Colin Moulding is a little more straightforward, but he's a brilliant songwriter and musician as well in his own right.
Yeah.
Different, but brilliant as well. Andy Partridge's songs require a little investment. I mean, because again, the verses, don't grab you right away. They're odd, they're dissonant
Hmm.
often. But his choruses are as good as, like you said, anything that Brian Wilson or Paul McCartney wrote. Andy Partridge's best work stands right up there with those guys.
Yep, I think so too. And I love the way the song ends too, with the church bells softly chiming, and then you get the bird sounds coming in, and that to me sounds a lot like what they were going to be doing on Skylarking
Yep.
in about 5 years.
It's a transitory record. They go from Drums and Wires and Black Sea, which are, it's basically live band in the room. It's stuff they can replicate note for note live pretty much. And now they're starting to use the studio a little more. They're working with Hugh Padgham still. Steve Willywhite no longer producing on this record, but his engineer from the two previous records, who, again, there's argument as to who came up with these drum sounds. But
Yeah.
he's, Hugh Padgham's pretty instrumental in that. So they're still working with Hugh. They're still working with the similar. They're not the Townhouse for this. I think they're at the Manor.
Part of the album is recorded at the Townhouse.
Yeah. But again, great sounding record, obviously because of them, but also who they're working with in the studio.
This is a great headphones album.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And it's transitioning. There's a lot more acoustic guitar on this. There's a lot of 12-string Rickenbacker from Dave Gregory, absolutely brilliant musician, not only a brilliant guitar player, but very involved in the arrangements. And that's key, certainly going forward as well, when the arrangements get more and more complex and they utilize the studio more and more as they're not touring any longer. And there's a tinge of sadness with this record. I'm not going to go too long about the whole album because this will probably be my album for the year, and we're going to talk about it more in depth later. But these are more complicated songs, certainly, but they're still a touring unit at this point, and this is the tail end of them before they fall apart and no longer tour, but they're playing these songs and they're still pulling it off, and it's incredible to watch. They were in a great live band, one of the best live bands. And so there's a tinge of sadness with this record because this is where that ends, which is tragic to me because they were killer live. Andy Partridge is an amazingly charismatic frontman. He's just a charismatic individual, fascinating character, brilliant guy, just a different mind, just a genius mind, funny as hell too, just a very quick wit. And that made it hard for his band members to understand what was going on because, God, this guy's just a natural frontman. He's a brilliant musician. He interacts with the crowd. He's funny. And they just don't understand why he's struggling.
Why doesn't he want to do this anymore?
Yes. Why is he struggling? But you mentioned this Valium thing, and he's lucky to be alive, going cold turkey on Valium. Now, I'm no MD, but I know enough about Valium to know that it is one of the most addictive drugs, and the withdrawal symptoms can be fatal. It is very, very difficult to wean yourself off of this drug, particularly when you've been on it long-term like he had. They started prescribing Valium to him when he was a child because, he had anxiety because of this difficult family situation. He had a mother who was mentally ill with OCD, and it made his childhood very difficult.
He was on Valium for 13 years. And then just went cold turkey. And he had no idea what was happening. I mean, he didn't know. He didn't see a doctor. He didn't know what was going on.
So he's going crazy and he doesn't know why. He doesn't understand it.
And the other band members weren't really sympathetic. They thought he was just being difficult.
But the whole thing was so traumatizing to him that he just couldn't get back on stage. Now, that's one part of it. The other part of it was, much like the Beatles, they're transitioning from being this beat group playing basically live in the room to these more complex song structures, more complex arrangements, more flavors in the studio, just something that would be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to replicate on stage. So there's that part of it as well. But to lose them as a live entity and to know that I will never get the chance, and I never say never, they're all still alive and healthy.
Right.
And part of me hopes that one day we'll get to see them play together live again, because I think the band would be incredible. Even though they were never a huge group in the U.S., they have enough of a cult following that if they were to tour, there would be huge demand for tickets. Huge. Yeah. So I hold out hope that one day that might happen. It's tragic to me that I never got the chance to see them on stage, because go on YouTube and watch the live clips. I mean, they're incredible musicians and great live energy. And they're playing stuff like Jason and the Ark. I mean, these are very complicated songs.
Very complicated.
And they're pulling it off on stage. It's just mind-blowing.
Yeah, I mean, complicated in the same realm as prog. And they do have some kind of prog-ish
Oh,
tendencies,
for sure.
and the
Definitely.
musicianship is definitely part of that. But, complicated song structure,
Yeah.
but it's presented in a pop vein, so I think it's even more interesting in a lot of ways because it really is something that would appeal to a larger audience because it has those pop tendencies behind it. I mean, later they would become a little bit more popular in America, like after Skylarking and Dear God was played on MTV a
Yeah.
lot, but they
Never,
still,
never top 40 popular.
nope, it's always kind of an underground band, but just so incredibly talented. And I'm excited to talk about the album if you choose this as your album, because the whole album is just amazing.
Well, let's just say that Asia is not going to usurp English Settlement in my list of top albums for 1982. Not that it's bad, but it's certainly not in that class.
No.
I've been listening to the Jay Giles Band Freeze Frame album, which was really big at the early part of the year.
Hmm.
Centerfold came out, the single, late 81, and then Freeze Frame, the single, in early 82. So kind of a weird album, Freeze Frame. The singles were very popular. The third
Hmm.
single, not as much, but the third single is kind of a heartland rocker, Angel in Blue.
I don't even know that
Yeah,
song.
I
I
don't
don't
remember
remember
hearing it on
that
the
song.
radio, but I think it would
Mm-mm.
sit really well. It sits really well with like Bruce Springsteen and Tom Petty and
Mm.
John Cougar. It's kind of in that vein. But Centerfold and Freeze Frame, two great singles. And this was a huge hit record for a veteran band that had been around, well known as a live attraction, great live band. But, their studio records had never been huge sellers. They'd had a
Yeah.
few top 40 scraping
Love
singles.
Stinks and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the Love Stinks album, the single, kind of announced this new, they're transitioning in the 80s. They handle it well. But you listen to the Freeze Frame record, it's just so cold and harsh sounding compared to the
Mm.
XTC record. Hugh Padgham's this cutting edge 80s producer with the drum sounds and everything. It's still a very warm sounding record and sounds great. But
Yeah.
listening to the Freeze Frame album a couple of times, it's just not a pleasant listen. The singles are good, and they're doing other stuff in the album that's just like headache inducing, just noisy, clattering.
There is kind of a tinniness about it, like even the
Yeah,
song Freeze Frame has that to it.
yeah,
Like when you
yeah.
say that, I'm like, oh yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah, I hear that.
And then, the B side to Freeze Frame was Flamethrower, which was it's like something Prince or The Time would have put out,
Mm.
like this funk jam. And actually, Black Radio was playing that back in the day. But yeah, so that's not going to make it for me, certainly. But I'm kind of sad that Centerfold probably won't make my playlist because that was a single I bought in the day. I don't think it's aged particularly well.
No, it hasn't, and it's actually really strange to think that that was a number one single,
Yes,
and it's
huge. Yeah.
it's pretty risque, and that's like the video, and yeah.
I heard Freeze Frame a while back. I said, oh, I think I might like this song better now than Centerfold. But
Hmm.
then listening to
Hmm.
the album, I'm like, I'm not sure. I'm kind of waffling. I like them
Centerfold
both.
is really catchy.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, it
It's a
really
great
is.
single. It's really a great single.
Yeah. It's just the subject matter that
Yes.
is.
But then again, the whole album, any references to women on the album, they're prostitutes or they're strippers or,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just the ugly side of that era, really,
Yes.
in both lyrical content and sound,
Yeah.
honestly. So that album's not going to make it. We just have a couple minutes left here. I do want to add one more song to the playlist. And we've already talked at length about the Go-Go's because Our Lips Are Sealed was on our 1981 list. And I told you there's going to be more Go-Go's, and there certainly is. I cannot not have We Got the Beat. We Got the Beat is tailor-made
Yeah.
for a party or a group. We talked about the complexity of Senses Working Overtime, the brilliant XTC single. This is the other end of the spectrum. This is just
Yes.
dumb, simple, great, brilliant rock and roll. Charlotte Caffey's song. And this was a key song for the Go-Go's. It was their transition from going from a punk band to a pop band. And Charlotte wrote this song, and she was a little wary about introducing it to the others of the group because, they're a punk band at this point. This is a pretty poppy song, with one exception. They all loved it. They all recognized immediately that this had great potential. The original single release was kind of a lower fi recording for Stiff Records when they were touring England. They wanted to put a record out so people knew who they were when they were touring with the ska bands over there in 80 and 81. They re-recorded it for the Beauty and the Beat album. It was the second single after Our Lips Are Sealed, came out in early 82, and it was a smash. and it hasn't dated a bit. You could play this at any sporting event, any party, and people are going to love it.
Yeah. It hasn't lost its charm.
No.
And it is such a classic, just rock and roll sound that it's never going to go out of style. And it is a seminal single for them. I mean, it's really what put them on the map. And most people identify the band with that song.
Yeah, you certainly hear it more nowadays than you do Our Lips Are Sealed, which I think is the superior song. I think Our Lips Are Sealed is
Yeah.
an absolutely brilliant pop song. But We Got the Beat has its own special charm, and it will endure forever.
Yes.
It will endure. And there's more good Go-Go's music to come in this year because their second album comes out later in 82, and you Vacation, which is another great
Vacation's
single.
a great song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that it'll be on the playlist. We don't go too heavy on the Go-Go's because there's another great single on their next album too, which might make it as well. But certainly We Got the Beat. We Got the Beat has to be there. It can't not be there.
And it was a single in 82, even though the album came out in 81.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Which we have a few of those on our playlist for this year that are carryovers.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of stuff comes out late in a year, but it really doesn't hit until the following year. I mean,
yeah. And I mean, the two that we did in the last episode, it was just, they were way later than the albums came out.
Right. And we'll have another song coming up that actually originally came out in 81, but in the U.S. it wasn't a sensation until well into 1982. Dexy's Midnight Runners, which is another band that I've been wanting to explore more because, a one-hit wonder in the United States, but I think there's a lot more to them than just one song. Way more.
That whole album is great. And the album before that, their first album, also great. Yeah. And that's one of the albums I've listened to recently that I've actually listened to a lot of albums in the last week from 1982. And that one is definitely up there as one of the best.
So that's down the road. But our next episode, we're going to focus on one group in particular. I think 1982, when you're looking at the two biggest records of that year, there's one in the front half of the year, and there's one at the tail end of the year that really were the two totemic albums of the year. At the front end of the year, it's Toto 4, which ended up dominating the Grammy Awards the next year. The end of the year, of course, it's one of the biggest albums of all time, Michael Jackson's Thriller. Oh, and by the way, guys from Toto played on that record.
Same band. Yeah.
So that's coming up in our next episode of Matt and Cheryl's Gen Excellent Playlist. But until then, we thank you for joining us. I'm Matt.
I'm Sheryl.
And take care, everybody.